What if reality isn't material at all, but a shared dream woven by infinite, eternal minds? In James's book, The Dream of Matter, he explores the radical idea that our brains are not just organs of survival, but reflections of the soul's deeper activity. If that's true, then the existence of the soul is not only real, but measurable, visible in the patterns of thought, the rhythms of brainwaves, and the coherence or incoherence of our lives. This is more than spiritual speculation. By decoding the mathematics behind mind and matter, the book offers a structured, rational approach to consciousness, showing how personal growth, mental health, and even the future of civilization depends on the same principle: the evolution of mind toward coherence. Mental health, in this light, is not a private luxury, but social infrastructure. When minds fracture, families, institutions, and nations fracture with them. Drawing on neuroscience, ontological mathematics, and systems theory, The Dream of Matter reveals how the soul can be approached as rigorously as any science, and why recovering it is essential for both individual well-being and collective survival. From the intimate journey of self-actualization to the emergence of a new social logic, this is a vision of coherence as both healing practice and civilizational compass. Valeria interviews James Kroll. He is the author of The Dream of Matter: Neuroscience and Decoding the Mathematics of the Soul. James is a former Silicon Valley cybersecurity leader turned neurotherapy practitioner and the author of the upcoming book, The Dream of Matter: Neuroscience and Decoding the Mathematics of the Soul. After years of grappling with attention issues, burnout, and daytime fatigue, James discovered neurotherapy, an experience that profoundly reshaped his brain, his performance, and ultimately, his path. He now specializes in quantitative EEG, QEEG brain mapping, neurostimulation, and applied neurofeedback training. James holds certification as a QEEG technician and is trained in neurofeedback approaches that help clients build healthier brain patterns over time. Drawing from both systems engineering and cutting-edge neuroscience, he helps people manage and overcome symptoms related to focus, stress, mood, and trauma without relying on medication or traditional talk therapy. His mission is to raise awareness of these science-backed tools, which remain surprisingly unknown to the general public, despite their potential to change lives. The Dream of Matter grew out of a convergence between James' technical background, his transformation through neurotherapy, and a lifelong spiritual search for meaning and coherence. The book explores the deep structure of consciousness, arguing that the soul is real, governed by the same elegant mathematics that underlies the physical world and may even be measurable. Meet James at thedreamofmatter.com and peakmind.health. Here's the interview with James Kroll.
Aloha, everyone. This is another A Quest for Wellbeing podcast conversation. And my guest today is James Kroll. He is a neurotherapy practitioner and the author of the upcoming book, The Dream of Matter: Neuroscience and Decoding the Mathematics of the Soul. What's not to love about that? About the word soul, we just, and dream too. For some reason, it's funny how the brain kind of leans towards certain words for some reason. So this is my brief introduction to you, James. The question that I always begin my conversations with my guests is this one that you're probably familiar with. How would you introduce yourself? Who is James in this very moment?
Well, James in this very moment, at heart, he is a hacker, right? My whole life, I started my career in cybersecurity, of all things, figuring things out, trying to get inside the mind of the creator of the software that I was hacking. And, I've applied that throughout my life, including to the work I do today, helping people with their brains, helping figure themselves out, but also I like to joke, like, I don't hack software anymore. Now I'm hacking the soul.
Yes, yes. And wow, what a job to have. What a beautiful exploration. Unpack the soul. So let's begin there. What have you found as of today? How would you define the soul? What is the soul?
So in the tradition that I've studied many traditions, but from my youth, I was always attracted to the Pythagorean tradition. Right, all is number. So like the universe is mathematical at its core, and so
Right.
for me, the soul is kind of like a self-solving equation. Right, it's
Mhm.
and not just that, but we think of the soul or souls as the building blocks of the universe, right? We have countless infinite souls all participating to create a collective dream. And that's where the dream of matter comes from.
Mm.
And so the soul is really the most essential, certain thing there is, right? And we are that. We are, expressions of souls.
Right. So essential. That brings me back to Vedanta. Yeah, according to Vedanta, the word that they use is pure consciousness. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the essence of what we are. It's something that it's not something in the first place. It's not a thing. So it's a subject, and it doesn't take form ever. It doesn't have a purpose. It doesn't really do anything. It's just kind of everything else happens. What we perceive as objects happens in pure consciousness. So basically, it's like the space that holds everything, but it's not really. It doesn't do anything. Basically, doesn't do anything, but is everything at the same time. Because without
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, nothing would exist. So, how would the soul kind of fit within that perspective?
Well, it's a great question. And, I spent much of my 30s really entrenched in sort of non-dual thought
Right.
and contemplation, in fact. And what I find is these systems are actually quite compatible. Like when we think of the soul as mathematical, we can start to understand its structure. And let me try to explain a bit.
Yeah.
In the system that I'm describing, we have sort of two states of being. We have being, which is exactly what Advaita describes. Like in the state of being, we have infinite souls, but they are perfectly synchronized. Right, every soul is sharing the same perspective, thinking the same thoughts. They're in a perfect, what I would call a functional unity. They're not actually one thing, but they're all participating in the exact same activity. They're functionally one, right? And so that's a
Right.
sort of a non-duality, right? It's not one, it's not two, it's sort of functionally one.
Right.
But then what happens at the beginning of the cosmic cycle, every soul sort of goes its own direction, right? And so we end up with this chaos, right? We end up with this, basically that's where this idea of separation comes from. These souls they're not really separate. They're just out of sync with each other. And the cosmic cycle then becomes all about each of these souls returning to that unity. And what I just find so beautiful about this is that it gives a lot of purpose to this idea of non-duality, right? And the purpose is it's beyond just realizing, like having an epiphany that, oh, we're all one. No, to me, we have to do the work to harmonize with each other and really return to that functional state of unity. And for me, I just find that a really beautiful picture.
Wow. That really resonates and sounds true to me. Yeah, it resonates true. So doing the work to come together in harmony. So is that what you do with neurotherapy as a neurotherapist practitioner? I would love to understand
Well,
that work in relation to the soul.
yeah, well, sort of. In a way, in my work with neurotherapy, what I do is, people come to me not looking to restore
Yeah,
harmony to the universe. I'll say that, right? They have a
right.
problem. I can't focus. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I have PTSD or something. And what I do is
Yeah.
I start by measuring their brain. And, it turns out in this field, it's so fascinating. The leading theory of where these symptoms come from in the brain is basically the brain getting out of sync with itself, right? You have different parts of the brain, right, that do different functions. And symptoms emerge when they literally don't communicate effectively. Maybe this one network in the brain is it's too hyperconnected, right? It's talking too much, and that creates symptoms. Or maybe these other regions aren't communicating enough, and you get symptoms. Right. And ultimately, we see the same thing between, and that's within a mind, but we see the same thing between minds. And part of the thesis of my book is that many of the challenges we face in the world today really comes down to out of sync minds, right? We're just not aligned with each other mentally. And, I propose that neurotherapy, when we help an individual heal themselves, they actually become better able to connect with others. Can I share just a quick example?
Yes, of course.
So I don't work with, so I'm sort of non-clinical. I help people just get over symptoms and things, but I have some colleagues that work with married couples and who maybe they've tried everything and they're facing divorce. Right. And they come to one of these practitioners. A dear friend, Laura, does this. And what she does, she works with them individually. She helps them overcome their trauma or their chronic anxiety or, whatever have you. And then it's almost like magic. Once they overcome their own baggage, they see each other better. And they start to, the marriage is saved. And right. I think that's a great example. Like if you scale that up and you think about, the world, I think we're seeing the same patterns.
Yes, that's what we are working towards. It feels to me, people who are, would you call them conscious? Because some people seem to be very unconscious and they are not really even aware that they have this disconnection within themselves. Like you spoke about the brain, perhaps the parts of the brain are connecting with each other harmoniously. So how can we ever come into this beautiful state of harmony, per se, with the universe, with all souls kind of resonating together, with the same frequency, and then having this beautiful experience here, not just as with the humans, one another, but our environment, the earth, and then the stars, and we just go on, galaxies. Because I feel connected every time I look at the sky and then nature. For some reason, the sky feels a lot more, the stars in the sky, I feel connected a lot more to this dimension for some reason. I don't know exactly why. So my question is, is that something a vision that you have with this work, beautiful work that you're doing, that one day, someday we'll get there as collectively?
Oh, it's absolutely a hope. And it's something I talk about extensively in the book. But I think the first step is understanding sort of what a mind is, right? And kind of what the soul is, what the mind is, how it's constructed, how it works mathematically, how that relates. So part of the book is about how once we understand what the soul is mathematically, we can start to see how it's reflected in the brain, right? In the dance of electricity in the brain, for example. And that's a key part. But then, in order to operationalize this, right, and kind of really help the world get closer to this state, I think it just takes so many changes. Think of all our systems that are just not optimized to maximize our potential and create better minds, right? We have, I don't want to get too political, but right, capitalism is oriented towards revenue generation, not exactly cultivating better minds. And so these are topics that I talk about in the book.
Right. And that's the challenge, right, James? If we kind of part of a system that is doing quite the opposite, right, creating more disconnection, then how can we get there? I'm wondering if technology, AI, could help in a sense of we already have these days, as sound therapy, through frequencies. So I'm wondering if we had that somehow being sent, those signals, those frequencies being, I'm sure it's already I know some places that have that you walk in the place, inside of this place, and then it feels so different. Somehow, it seems like our brain automatically are being rewired or rearranged. So is that something do you think that's possible? I'm just wondering here. I never thought about this before, that we just put these frequencies out there.
Oh, I do. I specialize in training the brain, right? So I look at somebody as an individual and figure out where they're out of balance and help them come back into balance. And by doing so, typically they're better able to connect with others. And that happens naturally. We can. This is really clever. It's possible to use the same technology to literally synchronize two brains. And this is actually another example of marriage therapy. Something that some folks do is, and I've done this with my partner actually, where we have electrodes on both of our heads and we actually train our brains to synchronize. And what's interesting is it really creates almost this experience of getting to the point where you're sharing the same thought. It's kind of like when you complete your partner's sentence or you both have that insight at the same time. And so I specialize in the brain stuff, but there's lots of other ways to do this. And I think things like you're describing, audio frequencies, that can certainly help a group of people get onto the same, get in phase, I would call it, get in sync, and have a shared experience. And there may be, and just having that amazing shared experience, I think, shows us what's possible. But we still then have to do some of the work. Honestly, really getting in sync with others takes a lot of openness and understanding and stuff like that. I think there's still a lot of work, but I think there's lots of ways at scale that we can help people have that experience.
Right. Yes. I guess what it was, now we're getting to the topic of free will. So yes, like I mentioned, there's a lot of people who are not willing. They might be ready. They might recognize the dysfunctional patterns, the painful patterns, but they are not able to, they are not open to kind of, let's say, engage in neurotherapy or therapy at all, or any kind of healing. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they would have to be willing to do the work. So maybe that's why I was mentioning, maybe we can have some sort of frequency kind of it's almost like the work of the universe in a sense, right? Like the weather. No one can control the weather, but I have heard also about, weather manipulation too. I remember having a dream, actually. That's funny. Just last night, I think, the day before, somebody asking, would you like us to manipulate the weather? Is that something that, would you like that to be the case? So maybe that's not something that we want, right, James? Manipulate nature to the point where, we lose the freedom. This dualistic reality, I think, has a lot to do with freedom too. We have chosen to be here somehow. Even through ignorance, not knowing what we are, perhaps through that, we according to Vedanta, that was the case. So, talk to me about free will. I think that's what I'm getting at. Is that something that you believe in? Do we really have free will, or not?
I think absolutely. I think it's as I worked through the logic of the universe according to this Pythagorean tradition, free will sort of becomes necessary. Now, I will say, I think I just posted an Instagram reel about how funny it is, I think, that so many people want to basically write themselves out of the script and say, it's all determined. There's no free will. I think that sort of depresses me. I mean, we want to write ourselves out of the script. I mean, do we hate ourselves that much? But the thing about free will is, we're only as free kind of as we are conscious, right? I think of it this way. I use a metaphor of the unconscious mind being the producer of most of our thoughts, and then the conscious mind as being kind of the editor, right? And so as we become more conscious of what's driving us, whether it's from bias or fear or trauma, et cetera, we become
Yeah.
more able to edit that script. And I think that's where we build that muscle of real freedom. And I think free will is kind of a a spectrum. And another way I think about it is that, we're only as free as our own, awareness of our unconscious drives, but we're also only as free as the minds around us. Because as long as there's other minds around us that are programmed and driven by this stuff, they're going to push back on us. And so I there's a really beautiful point. I think that the time that we will be most maximally free is when the cosmic cycle ends, right? Because we'll all have become maximally conscious of ourselves. We will have reduced all of our friction with other minds. And so just think of that in that blink of an eye, when the cosmic cycle ends, like the opposite of the Big Bang, we'll all be free. Finally. And then we can begin again.
And then we can begin again, right? Wow. The dream. I like that the dream word, the dream of matter. That's so inspiring. According to Vedanta, life, this experience that we are having now, it is like a dream. It's not a dream because it's let's say half real. It's not 100% real, but it's a sub-reality. But going back, you probably heard about Sam Harris with his, I think the book was The Illusion of Free Will, something like that. He talked a lot about this. It makes, somehow, speaking of going back, we talked briefly off record about reason. So when we try to reason our way into the idea of free will, it kind of doesn't make sense, though. It's like the idea of karma too, because it's, for most people, that's the way they kind of explain suffering, that the patterns that we have, the painful experiences we go through, it's because of karma. We have done something. So it's the cause and effect. But then where did this begin, really? There's no beginning, right? It's a beginningless type of a thing, of phenomenon. And that is, it's illogical. So we can't really, we cannot rationalize, that either. Although it's still the most acceptable, I guess, way the logical mind accepts karma as the most the closest to truth, which I think it's also yes and no. And then the same with free will, from my perspective, because you speak of the unconscious mind, that as long as we are not conscious of the unconscious, then we are not really using our free will. But then how? And then if we have free will. I don't know, because then even the unconscious, where did that begin? And how free are we if we are just a byproduct of something that happened that we don't even know when and how? So yeah, all that becomes a mystery in a sense. And then that's why Vedanta makes sense to something in me. I don't know, not really the logical mind, but it resonates true. It kind of, there's a sense, there's something in me that says, this is it. This is it. The dream reality, and also that we're never born and we'll never die. We are just consciousness itself.
Yes. Well, for me, there's a lot of truth in there, but there's and I think in the book, I go through the complete chain of logic, like how we arrive at these things. It's probably too dense for right now, but what I can offer about free will is that imagine that you have infinite minds and they're all in perfect harmony, right? In fact, if you could meditate and perceive that, it would look like just one mind. Right. If they're all overlapping, all doing the same thing, you'd be like, oh, it's just one thing. And that makes sense. And I actually think that happens in meditation. We can glimpse that. And since it looks like one thing because it's all functionally the same. Everything is one. But imagine from that point, how would this set of infinite minds enter separation or like chaos or, create the Big
Right.
Bang. I think the only logical way for that to happen, and that's what this tradition says, is that every mind simultaneously starts exercising its will. And everybody goes off in a different direction. And at this point, every mind, every soul is completely unconscious, right? Just fumbling around, bumping into things. And just,
Right.
over eons, they start to
Yeah.
become more organized. And, you see planets form, you see, minds start working together and complex life and so on. So I see a ton of truth in traditions like Advaita. And I think
Yeah.
with these rationalist traditions, we just kind of sharpen the focus a bit and we start to see some details. It's like, that kind of fits, right? Because for me, the idea of, maybe a non-duality, we can understand that non-duality has structure, right? And so it's a functional unity that diversifies and then comes back to itself. But it's still I think it's still compatible, is what I'm saying.
Yes, it's definitely connected. This is one of the most, let's say, complex parts to explain when Vedanta teachers. I have been in touch with so many of them that it kind of. The Upanishads kind of is very clear about this in the end. The question about how can something that's non-dual, something that it's indivisible and it can be two. It's one without second. So it's that if that reality it's absolute and one it can't divide. How come we are having this experience that feels very real? And then the explanation, what they say is that what they found, that I'm like, thank God we don't have to do that work that the rishis did, that it's basically a dream. That's why I really like the word dream. Is a dream reality. That means God is dreaming. If we can think about the ultimate reality, the absolute reality as God, then it's like when we go to sleep at night and then if somehow we just stay there and never woke up to this reality, then that one would be true. Then we would believe that this is the new way of being, like, okay, I'm here now. And actually when we dream at night, as you know, we do believe we just lose complete contact with this reality now that we are sharing to the other one. And then there are many realities like that according to them. There's so many, but that is happening in the absolute reality. So it's basically a dream. So in the end, it was never split. There's no Big Bang, none of that. Nothing split it really. It's still one. It's happening within one, let's say, one mind. If the absolute reality is a mind, all these sub realities and the dreams, they're happening within that realm. So basically that's how they explain, which the mind, the logical mind, can never grasp, but it somehow it just resonates true to me. Like, wait a minute, that is from my own experience too, with dreams, lucid dreams and all that, and also having out of body experiences. Well, they're all spontaneous, some of them that I did it on my own. So that I was kind of guided into. So that is just kind of it felt very much true. Like, wait a minute, that is what my experience says. That this is a dream reality, and it was never two. So it's all connected, all one, and it's happening in one thing. So I don't know if that makes sense to you. Have you heard it this way before?
Oh, I absolutely have. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that anything ever split. It's more like
right.
all of these souls forgot that they were unified. And so that the one is inherently many. It's more like you think of God as a hive mind, not a single mind, but a hive mind that just forgets that it's sort of functionally one. And
Mm,
I am going to be a little bold here and
yeah.
suggest that, oh gosh, I think the rishis achieved some amazing things. Like I've read about how
Yes.
they're able
Yeah.
to perceive things like the speed of light and, boundaries of the
Mm,
universe
mm,
thing just intuitively. I mean,
yes.
that
Yeah.
blows my mind. I haven't had
Yeah.
experiences like that.
Yeah. Me
Excuse
too.
me.
Yeah.
But, we talk a lot these days about how often our senses lie to us and how our senses,
Mm,
even our mystical intuitive senses, just
right.
they're goggles, right? And they don't allow
Mm,
us to perceive reality as it is. And that's where
right.
the
Right.
promise of rationalism comes in, that we can like deduce things without ever even using any mystical senses. And so I still think that these ideas are in many ways compatible if you look at
Yeah.
it the right way. I see a lot of truth in these things. There's just some slight sort of interpretations that I would make, like with the non-duality being inherently many that just forgets a singular and comes back to itself. Um,
Mm.
and I'll go way deeper in this in the book. I love these conversations. I mean, I think it's um, I've had so many of these over the years.
Ah, yes, I love them too. I want to mention that your book will be published on January 2026. Is that still accurate, James? This
It's
the
probably
time
going to
frame?
be, yeah, it's probably going to be more like March. I've had some delays with
March.
the editing process, but probably going to be more like March, and I'm really excited. And this is by the way the first venue where I'm really talking about it. And I heard about your show. Somebody mentioned it to me, and I love how you weave together, you know, things like mental health and healing, but also the spiritual angle.
Yes, yeah, because it's all connected, like we know. I love the way you said that in the beginning of our conversation. You did mention that too, the neurotherapy that you do, this work, it's connected to, yeah, spirituality, the soul. So, yes, let's see. Just going back to that idea of the one becoming, you mentioned forgetting. That's what a lot of spiritual traditions they use, a lot of people in the spiritual communities too. Remember, we need to remember. Let's go back to remembering what we are. But according to Vedanta too, it's not even remembering, because it was never really forgotten. It's something that it's happening right now, like in this moment, regardless of our intellectual understanding and our explanations and the mental ideas. Regardless of all of it, it's the what's real is that we are still one. We're never separate. We'll never be, and that's not even. Some people call it illusion, but it's not the illusion of being separate. But it's really delusion, because I think illusion, it can be quite real though, like the experience of this experience right now, it feels very real to me. That's the illusion. So the illusion that you and I are different beings, separate from one another. You're a man, I'm a woman, we are, this, but it's not entirely true. So it's the illusion. So that's a play, and it feels to me like that they called Maya, and that's good, isn't it? Because we having this experience, I think it's quite fascinating that we are able to have an experience like this. But then I think delusion is what causes suffering. I'm wondering what your perspective is on this illusion,
Sure.
delusion.
Well, I should highlight that there are some I think there's a lot that's compatible with the Pythagorean tradition that I identify with, and
Yeah,
something like Advaita or even other forms of non-duality. There are some differences, right? Because what I'm
yeah,
suggesting is that it takes more than just realizing that, oh, we're all one, and some magical like insight,
right.
but really we have to do the work to return to that state. And for me, I find that really beautiful, that
Yeah.
it takes much more than just like a flash of insight. Oh, and we realize everything is one. No, we have to like do the work to return to that unity. And so
Mm,
that is a big difference, and an incompatibility. But hey, there's many traditions, many perspectives. I think, someday we'll know that we'll all know the truth. Um,
mm,
but for suffering,
yeah.
um, I think let's look at the neurotherapy, right? And so, in an individual mind, even in the brain, we get these symptoms, which we could like label as a kind of suffering, when we're out of harmony with ourselves.
Right.
And so we have to do the work to bring, like, I identify a lot with, I don't know if you're familiar with internal family systems,
Yes, I am. Yes.
right? I think in fact, part of my book is really about how a mind is inherently this collection of parts. And
Right.
in a lot of ways, we suffer when those parts are out of sync. And so it's a matter of
Yeah.
bringing them back into cooperation and coherence.
Yeah.
One other thought, you mentioned karma. Oh my gosh, this is something
Oh, yeah.
I talk
Yes.
about in the book, which is, one of my challenges with the suffering from karma, most ideas about karma, or even like law of attraction, is that we often neglect the collective perspective. And,
Mm, right.
in, in the, in the framework that I'm trying to introduce the world to really in this book, yes, there's an individual perspective, but we're also collectively creating a world that then acts on us. And so just
Mm,
because something bad happened to us doesn't mean it's not like a direct one-to-one relationship between everything that happens to me is somehow like my soul's fault. There's also the collective aspect. And
right. Right.
I think we often like leave that out, right? We have to do the work for ourselves, but also to create a better world for everybody else.
Mm. Yes, 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 yeah. That's a huge and an important point because a lot of us feel like victims. Somehow, this happened to me, my family. Or sometimes there's a lot of blame too and shame. Oh, I did this. I deserve all the suffering and all that. But yes, that's so true about collective karma. Yes, we are
Mm-hmm.
affected by it. But then always going back to that, if we really really go deeper into it, then it's I mean, that's freedom itself, isn't it? If we can't explain anyway, at least rationally, in how this all began and why the purpose of being here and all those things, I think it's very simple in that sense. If we intuitively kind of understand that we are here just to experience, that's the experience that really matters, because apart from the experience, there's nothing in the sense of no experience. Then it would be the perception of nothing, the experience of nothingness. It's still an experience, I guess, but there's nothing happening, no activities. So there will be consciousness. So I just see it as I was reluctant to say this before because I suffered a lot. But having this experience here as a woman born in Brazil, and then having a lot of trauma and all those things, but now I can say, I'm able to say that it's a gift to have this experience. As painful as it has been, I think the most painful part of it was not knowing that I was part of it all, that connected to everything. That was really, really painful. So now it feels more like moment by moment, being present. And this experience is interesting, fascinating. And then, like you said about the parts, I've been doing a lot of work with that, even these days, kind of having conversations with parts, with parts of, I can say parts of the mind, because now it's the mind. I see there's a huge difference too between consciousness, which is the kind of observe the experience, is giving rise to experience, and then experience itself. So I find it fascinating to kind of work with the experience, like, become aware, basically giving attention to, being conscious of, so that though all that is experience. So I don't know, do you feel like it's something that you work with too, or even mention when with your clients, about being the one who is aware of whatever's happening and not being that? Yeah, that's a
It's a
question.
great question. So sometimes from a coaching perspective, I'll talk about that, but I try to avoid, like, I'm not a counselor, right? So I don't go
Oh,
into
yes.
like parts work with somebody, although gosh, like parts work is some of the
Yeah.
most fascinating self-exploration I think I've ever done. Um, the I am in it from a coaching perspective. I do talk to people about purpose too, though. Like, I mean, to some degree, right?
Yeah.
People are just trying to find their relative purpose. Like, oh gosh, what meaning do I make in my life, and what purpose do I
Yeah.
have? But I tend to think, like, and I think it's perfectly okay to have different perspectives on this. In the framework I've studied, excuse me, it's just my cold.
Yeah. Do you want to get some water?
We absolutely have a purpose, right? If the universe was just exploring diversity, say for the sake of diversity, would it ever get anywhere? Or maybe that's the point. The universe never gets there. But from my perspective, the universe is absolutely headed towards sort of an omega point where every mind, every soul will return to that functional unity. And so the purpose then is, again, for us to resolve our differences, come closer together, understand each other, and literally have the mathematical waves of our minds come into sync. Like if you imagine like two sine waves, just, kind of simple mathematical waves, getting
Yeah.
closer and closer aligned, right? And in fact, something that's really beautiful about that I've learned is light itself is, I mean, this will be a little bit mathematical and scientific, but light itself is a sine and a cosine wave, an electric and a magnetic wave, perfectly 90 degrees from each other. And they're in perfect symmetry. And that's where we begin mathematically, and that's where we return to. So in a very real way, like, I think there's this poetic thing about how mathematically we are light, or well, fundamentally we're light. We become broken light and then have to return to light. And so that's the cosmic purpose that I see.
Right. Yeah. From that perspective, it makes so much sense because then we are speaking of the laws of nature. So it's still the observation of objects. But the interesting thing about Vedanta is that they kind of guides us to always, 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 always look for the who is having the experience, who is being aware of the experience of the object. So anything that's is an experience, even it doesn't matter how mystical it is or spiritual we call it, it's still this relationship between subject and object. So they keep asking us to go back to the object. So who is aware of whatever is happening? So in that sense, I don't. It becomes so much. It's simple. It becomes very, very simple. Even through a lot of the work that I have done, the healing work, and I still do it. The work of parts, like observing the movements of the mind, and I have those lucid dreams, and a lot of times, the psyche, the parts will say, "I'm lost. I'm split," and then automatically, something in me says, "No, as long as I am aware of you, you're not lost, you're not split." And then that which kind of recognize that, it's still something that I become curious, something in me becomes curious about it. Like, oh, who said that? As long as I am aware of you, you're not lost, you're not split. So, and then I keep it going back, kind of, it's almost like going, if there's such a thing, because deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And then finally, you kind of let go of the whole thing. It's that's where my practices are, just as a psyche, as body mind, to kind of let things flow like the Tao. I'm sure you're familiar with the Tao. Kind of, it just does what it does. Like when you speak of the soul, I think about universal intelligence. There's an intelligence here that's doing something that we are not even aware of, or maybe we cannot even rationalize with our minds. So we can never actually understand. So because we can never understand, the best thing we can do, in a sense, is to become aware, conscious of those movements, what's happening, and perhaps having some fun while that's taking place. That's why I kind of lean towards the concept of joy. It goes back to I love laughing. I can't help it. It's like one of the best things. Even laughing at, making all these efforts, intellectually, mentally to understand the mystery. I just laugh at it a lot of times. And I can't help it. It's just so much simplicity and then laughter. It kind of making it simple and then kind of having fun, throughout the whole process per se. And it is a process, and sometimes can be painful. But even then, if you can have that lightness, even the word light, James, kind of imply that, don't you think? Like in a sense, being light. And the lighter we become, the more playful we become. We can just move, like the Tao says, just we move our bodies and our minds kind of move spontaneously, gracefully within this song of life. Basically, life becomes music; it becomes a song, and that the body and the mind they are just part of instruments. It become like it goes back to the harmony too that you speak of, and then kind of syncs, with the like a tree in the wind, kind of just goes with that flow. And I know some people kind of don't like the idea of the flow. I do though. I would love to. Yeah, talk to me for a moment about that. The Tao and the flow kind of going with whatever is here presented.
Yeah, for me, I think there's a like what comes to mind for me is when you say lightness and flow is kind of play. Yeah, I think you have to be open to. I think a lot about play, and I think I was learning from a bit of a shaman once who was just like the most playful character, and I realized that to really be open and like understand things, you have to be able to be light and play and flow with things. But for me, that doesn't mean that there's no direction and no purpose. It just means it means more like how do we respond to things and how open and receptive are we? And hopefully that makes sense. I lost track of the the topic a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love how you keep going back actually to the to this core kind of message that you have about the soul and purpose. The soul's it's almost like I have heard so many times, and I talked to you off record about moving to Hawaii, and then there was it was very intuitive, just go there. And I have never heard about Kauai before, coming here. I'm like, oh gosh, what's happening? And then somebody said, that's the soul's calling, it's the soul's purpose. But that again feels like this movement again, life itself caring, the body, mind, through intuition, ideas, into this movement of bringing the body here. And then I remember saying that people would say, I was in Florida and people would say, oh, you're going to Kauai. Gosh, it's a beautiful place. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going there. I'm taking the body there. I'm already there. How I feel like I'm already there. And it felt that way. Really, it felt my inner experience was that I was already here and I had never been here before. So I'm wondering if that's what you speak of when you speak of the purpose. So in a sense, it goes back to me, it feels like it goes back to the openness, yes, and also letting life guide us as life itself and becoming life itself.
Yeah, I think if in this purpose that I'm talking about, like all of the infinite souls returning and harmonizing back to perfect unity, the reality is that is not going to happen in one lifetime. And it's not something that we've talked about here, but that also introduces like reincarnation. There are lots of ways to think about it. And even in a world where like it's just a matter of these souls sort of like forgetting that they were functionally one, there's still this whole process that has to unfold. And so in the book, I talk about, reincarnation, and there's very much a drive that comes from these past lives. And for example, this book, as I've written it, I'm like, where is this coming from? Like I go back and read some of the stuff I've written and it's like, who wrote this? And I really feel it coming from just like a buildup of, past attempts to try to figure this out. And I mean, I would just speculate that could be part of your call to Kauai.
Right. Oh, so yeah, Vedanta says that too. So exactly that. That whatever we started in different lifetimes, because yes, they do recognize that as long as we still believe that we are separate beings, we are separate from life itself, from pure consciousness, then we fragments of the mind, the strongest imprints, will still live on, and then in those imprints, they do include, in a very important way, the spiritual ones. So if we have been practicing this, actually, they said anything that we have been practicing, been doing over and over and over again, then it just stays with us. We bring through every lifetime. So that would make sense. Yeah, the inspiration that you had for the book, and wasn't using the words, especially these words, dream, soul. Of course, that really it comes to me like very intuitively too, as you had these experiences before. So you've been exploring these before in different lifetimes as a soul, which is we call it mind, but it's really so. In a way, do you differentiate these two aspects of being, mind and soul, or they are one and the
Oh, it's a
same?
great question. Honestly, I tend, and even in the book, I say, okay, I'm going to use these things interchangeably, although they're not really. Like, if
Right.
I had to be formal about it, I would consider the soul to be um, the eternal entity that never changes. Right.
Right.
And all souls are sort of functionally one. And I think of the mind as the soul in motion, right? The mind being the separate, like the instantiation of that soul that's
Mm,
going through all these lifetimes and will
yeah,
eventually return. And so I think of like the mind is the soul in motion, and the soul is the eternal part of us.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting the way you put it, because according to Vedanta, then in this case would be pure consciousness. So the soul, they don't speak of the soul, but they speak of, or the spirit. They use the word pure consciousness, absolute reality. Would that be the same too? I know you're familiar with Vedanta. Would that be the same too, James? The soul and the absolute reality.
I think a lot of these things are very comparable. You know,
Right.
there are some differences, like when we talk about like purpose, like I'm talking about it, and these infinite souls being a functional unity. But yes, I think we're largely speaking the same language.
Yes, yeah. It feels that way when I hear you say that, going back to returning to, yeah, to unity, and then the soul being that per se destination, then there would be pure consciousness. But then Vedanta keeps saying that over and over. You never left. You never left actually that destination. You are the destination. You are the journey. You are everything. It's just the delusion of that. They really, some teachers really, which I kind of lean towards them more, they really don't use the word illusion, because for this, what's happening here,
Mm-hmm.
it's not an illusion. It's just the play of consciousness. So yeah, it's a play, it's a dream. So it's not, we know about dreams, right? Dreams can actually change our reality in a sense, like lucid dreams, or some people actually have been traumatized by their dreams, like their night dreams. So I mean, I shouldn't laugh at that. I was never. I was traumatized too. I had some nightmares before from the traumas that I had, and I remember like being re-traumatized. The entire day felt so, I mean, in probably months because of those nightmares. So, in a sense, that's why Vedanta don't really consider this, what's happening here that we call life, the shared reality, an illusion, because it can have an impact. It definitely has a lot of impacts, and it can cause a lot of suffering too, collective, individual and collective suffering. So, but delusion is different. It's just really the total ignorance of not knowing, ignorant in the sense of not knowing what we are. That's really that's the, yeah, that's the part that's kind of scary in a sense. I don't know what I was getting with this. I think I forgot what I was going with
Well, I love
this.
it. I think there's a lot of beauty here. And I think, I think largely we're speaking the same language. And from
Yeah.
the tradition that I'm writing about in this book, I think the biggest tweak I would make, right, to the words we use when talking about Advaita is that cracking that delusion. To
Yeah.
me, it's
Yeah.
not just something that you can just sit and have an epiphany. It's more like there's a lot of work that goes into it. We have to,
Yes.
and part of cracking that code is doing the work to become more whole and resolve all those differences
Mm,
within and
mm,
without. And
mm,
I think
mm.
the tradition that I'm speaking of is just a bit more explicit in those details. It's the way I think Advaita is taught. It is simple. I mean, it's kind
Yeah.
of it,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of truth to it. The tradition that I'm communicating, it is one of the most complex intellectual subjects I've ever encountered. So it's not easy, but for me, it's been very rewarding to study.
Right. Yes. And of course, what are you saying about the work that has to be done? Yeah, absolutely. It takes work. So that can become very complex, right, James? That work.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. Try to get into. Have you done yourself unconscious? Have you tried, like Carl Jung? He did the work of kind of dive into the unconscious. That's scary though, because you can get lost. We're speaking of like realms of the mind, and a lot of people have gotten lost, and you see that in a lot of the mental illnesses. Some people that they have got themselves in complete confusion of realities. They have no idea which one is real, which one it's half real, and I mean it's just sad. So, have you done that? That was my question. The work of that's to me one of the
Yeah,
most complex works that you can do. Dive into the unconscious.
it is. So so lucid dream work is one of my favorite.
Yeah,
Is I think
yeah.
one of the most productive things for me. And the first time that I I became lucid in a dream, and I was in an experience from my youth that was, gosh, lots of bad decisions, let's say. And what
Yeah.
was interesting is I could see like my unconscious started to paint over what was in front of me. Like the dangerous
Mm.
situation became an innocent library. But because I was lucid, I was saying, no, like I want to see it. And I could literally see almost like the pixels change so I could see what was there. And
Right.
it was an amazing experience to sort of uncover things
Mm.
from my unconscious mind. And to answer your question, I have been lost several times and then found. It's
Right.
been quite a journey. I think anybody who I'm sure you have perhaps too, right? Anybody who tries to do this work, I think we do play a bit with some treacherous waters for sure.
Yes. Yeah. It's. I guess not for everyone, but some people. It happens for some people spontaneously, like shamans, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
raised in that tradition, so it was very very common, like normal to do that. Kind of, it's not something that's strange or different or abnormal. So yes, I'm very familiar, and I was never really scared of going into those realms. But sometimes it happened a lot spontaneously when I was young. So, but I was guided back, I guess. Not I guess. I'm here for a reason. I'm speaking. I'm here for a reason. Yeah, that I've
Mm-hmm.
been back. But and that's the thing. I guess that's the thing that I ask a lot, and not too many people are open to they're not even born into, let's say, these kinds of experiences. So they're not familiar, they're not open, they're not interested, they don't even know that they exist. So I'm wondering if that would you say that impose limitations if we are not open to the unconscious, or we don't have to go into the unconscious to kind of do the work?
I think I think it does. And part of my hope, like in my work with neurotherapy, so a little background. For most of my life, I actually experienced like these sleep attacks. So basically, it's kind of I was never diagnosed with narcolepsy, but that's basically what it was.
Right.
And so I
Right.
became very, very comfortable, right, with, oops,
Mm,
I'm drifting away, you know,
right.
and I had to become very comfortable with the dream
Right.
state. And I think
Mm,
so. Perhaps like you, it was always
yeah.
very, very natural for me.
Right.
But then I lost it. And as an adult, though, I wanted to learn how to really like, why is this happening? And so a story I read about in the book is using my neurostimulation technology, where I actually like stimulate the brain with frequencies to create different states. I was able to induce, like basically like train my brain and learn how to consciously produce these lucid dreaming and out of body states. And my hope, I'm pretty
Mm,
far from this, but my hope is that
mm,
someday we will have
yeah.
the technology where we can effectively train people to have something like an out of body experience and then in turn
Mm,
lucid dreams. Because like the
mm,
moment,
yeah.
I think it's like an initiation. It's like a big bang moment where, whoa,
Yes.
how can I
Yes.
see the world the same way again? Right? Once I've,
Right. Right.
traveled out of my body. And so I sort of hope that I don't know when it'll happen, but I'm sure we'll get there where
Mm,
we can show people the way in a much easier way. Like people can learn how to do this today, but how many people do? It's not normalized. I would love to see a world where this becomes more normalized and we have the technology to make it easy for people, reduce the
mm,
barriers. And yeah,
yes.
I think giving people that experience fundamentally changes somebody.
Right. So they become aware of, the aspects of themselves, right? That we are multi-dimensional. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, within the experience, yes. This is something that that would be wonderful. I know you have a self-guided ebook. I want to mention your services. So you have the neuromodulation and neurofeedback. That's one, and then self-guided ebook coaching, and then also a free consultation. You give that to anybody who is interested. And also, of course, your book. I love the cover of your book too. So, The Dream of Matter, Neuroscience and Decoding the Mathematics of the Soul. It's a beautiful cover. And so, yeah, talk to me about that. And I'm wondering if this is something that you already offer, because I don't find too many helpful guides online, on Audible, on lucid dreams. So, that would be wonderful if you can come up with that technology. I'm wondering.
Yeah, so that's part of my dream. Like I was able to
Mm,
develop some tech and I was sort of surprised. Intuitively, my intuition led me to some methods. I did it to myself, and then that night, I just kept popping out of my body over and over and over again. And
right.
from that
Right.
experience, I was then able to say, "Oh, it's kind of like a pointing out instruction, if you know that term. Like it showed me
Yeah.
how, and then
Yeah.
from there, I was able to replicate it without the technology." And it's totally a dream. Someday I'd like to turn that into a guide, but for
Yeah.
now, I typically recommend some classic books. Like I think the to plug a favorite author, Mastering Astral Projection in 90 Days by Robert Bruce is probably one of the best guides to effectively like lucid dreaming and out of body travel that I've come across. But
Right.
someday I hope to offer my own my own tech for that.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Please let me know. Please let me know. I would love to share and also try it. I would love that. In your book just inspires me, kind of that kind of work. For some reason, the dream word kind of it stays with
Mm-hmm.
me. Dream word. It's almost like getting to the soul through dreams. Through dreams you can access the soul. The dreams being a portal in a way, like a door to the soul, a gate to the soul. Yeah, that would be. That would be a very, very. That would be an interesting, not just book, another book for you if you ever write one like that, a shorter one. Let me know. And then because this is very much needed too. I haven't seen anything. The one that you mentioned in books on lucid dreams, they're kind of very long and they are too
Mm-hmm.
intellectual. So it becomes too much a mental thing. And then it's not, we can, for some of us that are not, it depends, ADHD, like there's like so many people with that they cannot even get anywhere. They just try. But then I think a simple guide to lucid dreams. Oh my God, James, if you come up with that, let me know, please.
I think the trick there will be understanding what a lucid dream really is, like what the mind is doing, what that looks like in the brain, and then being able to train that. There are people who have tried, right? And there's, over the decades, there have been all kinds of products that try to like stimulate a lucid dream. But I think what they've been missing is just fundamentally understanding like what a lucid dream is, right? They kind of tend to reduce it to some scientific correlates, like, we see this activity in this part of the brain, so let's stimulate that. Well, there's more to it. That's what I'm suggesting. And so cracking that code, I think someday, hopefully soon, we will be able to get there.
Yes. Please let me know. There are so many benefits to it. Anyway, like lucid dreaming, because you're accessing the unconscious. And but gosh, I have done a lot of work through lucid dreams. So we're almost at the end. I have to say, it has been wonderful to talk to you. I could stay here forever, literally. I want to mention your website. So it's the dreamofthematter.com and also peakmind.health. So both links will be on the podcast notes, clickable, so it's easy that way. Any final thoughts, James? Is there anything you left unsaid?
No, Valeria, thanks so much. I before we talked, I listened to a number of your guests, and I enjoy what you do. I'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your beautiful presence, for your openness, for sharing the work that you have been doing. And the book, please come back when your book's published too. The Lucid Dream app or anything that you do that relates to that, please let me know. And also when your book's published. But we'll be in touch, and you have a wonderful rest of the day. I think it's a night for you, right? So but we'll be in touch again.
Thanks, Valeria.
Thank you. Bye for now, James. I'll talk to you off record. Bye for now.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about James Crowell and his work, please visit thedreamofmatter.com and peakmind.health.